For 3 decades, the Babes in the Wood murders have haunted Sussex Police.
It's not every day you find 2 dead 9-year-old girls. Karen Hadaway was lying on her back as if she was asleep. Nicky Fellows was up against her, just 2 kids asleep in the wood. Like that's, and hence the name Babes in the Wood.
Saddest day of my life. That I lost my daughter.
Thought it was a dream. It's a living nightmare.
Now we get the full story from the man who, against all odds, finally brought a child killer to justice.
You could just feel what Russell Bishop had done to their families and to their lives for 32 years.
Not killing, lads! Yay!
With access to exclusive police footage, we discover how Russell Bishop continually denied these terrible crimes.
I was just like, man, fuck it, man. Getting fucking stitched up. I've got no Russell other than that, man. Fucking hell, man.
For the first time, we hear police officers' reactions to the fact that Bishop was free to strike again.
She's snatched, literally snatched off the street, thrown into the boot of this car. I honestly believe that he thought that he'd killed her.
With insight from the forensic scientists who helped solve the Stephen Lawrence case, we reveal how Russell Bishop was finally brought to justice.
From a taping of Karen Hadaway's arm, we actually had a mixed profile of Karen Hadaway and Russell Bishop.
I was so convinced as I've ever been, that he was the killer.
Where were these children last seen?
They were last seen over at the Coldine shop at the bottom of Coldine Lane.
Right, and they're 2 9-year-old girls?
2 9-year-olds.
And who am I speaking to now? Mrs.
Hadaway.
In December 2018, Russell Bishop was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of 2 9-year-old schoolgirls, crimes of which he was acquitted in 1987, but then recently retried at the Old Bailey after a gap of 32 years.
Fears began to grow when 9-year-old Karen Hadaway and friend Nicola Fellows failed to return to their homes on a Brighton council estate last night.
I thought she was hiding and playing up until about 7:30, 8 o'clock, because she was a creature of habit, used to come in and watch Top of the Pops and EastEnders. When she didn't turn up, then I thought something was amiss then.
It was obvious right from the start. This wasn't an ordinary missing person inquiry. There was a lot of tension. There were literally hundreds of police cars along in front of Malscombe Police Box, and it really was a machine that had rolled into action.
I thought, she's in somebody's house. But no, she wasn't. And then someone told us that she'd seen her over the park, and she would never go over the park.
9-year-old Karen Hadaway and Nicola Fellows were last seen buying chips at 6:45 p.m. yesterday.
Michelle stayed out all night. She didn't go to bed, she didn't sleep. I believe she ended up at the seafront shouting and calling out Karen's name.
Much of the area, only a few hundred yards from the girls' home, is covered by dense undergrowth, making it no easy task to discover a body concealed there.
I used to smoke a pipe, so I thought, well, I've been doing house inquiries for 4 or 5 hours. I'll have a quick smoke before I go back to doing them. I got my pipe out, tried to light it, and as I tried to light it, this voice from behind said, "Oi, what are you doing?" And me thinking, oh, I've been caught by the superintendent, who was around, Dave Tomlinson. And I turned around, it was Russell Bishop. He said to me, oh, I'm not going to search anymore. I've been searching all day, and my dog, he's a tracker dog, and we've been looking, and we're going to give it up. I said, well, no, you've got to carry on, And he went, well, I'm not going to look anymore. And I said, no, we've got to keep looking. And he said, well, if I found them and they were dead, I'd get nicked, wouldn't I?
With this strange comment, Russell Bishop flickers across the police radar for the first time.
By now it was dark and cold. This is not the sort of night that 2 9-year-olds are going to be out for fun.
My son was on the search the next day. He said, she'd be home, Mum. And I said, I don't know, I thought I was really panicking and thinking where where she was, and was she cold, was she, wet or anything.
Last time I saw her was the day before. I was stood at a bus stop and she was walking past the bus stop. I said, hurry up, darling, you'll be late for school.
I think in our heart of hearts the next day we knew that it was going to be bad news and they were going to be found killed or murdered.
Police in Brighton have discovered the bodies of two small girls who disappeared yesterday evening. Nicola Fellows and Karen Hadaway were last seen alive playing near their homes at Molescombe.
I was told down at the police box that one.
Police in Brighton say the two schoolgirls found murdered in a park less than half a mile from their homes had been sexually assaulted.
I'd got to the Wild Park and seen two men sitting on the ground in despair, really. And standing beside them was another man who was shuffling on his feet, whistling, and had his hands in his pockets and just looked totally out of place.
It's when I met the three young men at the scene, I was concerned that one of them certainly looked very pale and looked to me as if he was going to faint. The other young man was also understandably very distressed at what he'd seen, but I was surprised that Russell Bishop didn't seem at all concerned. He didn't show any reaction. I didn't know who he was at the time, so I thought, well, perhaps that's how he's reacting to what was a terribly distressing scene. He seemed more concerned about his dog, actually, than what we were dealing with.
Invariably, people who find bodies don't do it by accident. I thought I'd have a chat with this other guy who turned out to be Russell Bishop. That's when I began to think, there's something really wrong here. I said to him, well, what did you do then? And he said, oh, I went across to the bodies and felt both girls around their necks for a pulse. And I thought it was strange because you just, unless he's got a background in medicine, you just wouldn't do it because it'd be much easier to try at the wrist for a pulse.
Bishop seemed quite detached by it all, as if, it was an everyday occurrence. When you talk to criminals, they can be very offhand about stuff, and he was, and he was quite, well, detached. He was, he knew where they were, and here he is talking to a policeman. I think perhaps in his own mind he thought if he's talking to a policeman when they're found, he's in the clear.
The police believe the two girls were killed where they were found, lying side by side, the victims of a strangler who'd molested them first.
The day after they're reported missing, Karen and Nicola are found in a wooded den, just a few hundred yards from their homes.
They come and told me the details about how, and they told me she'd been asphyxiated and that she'd been sexually abused before and after death. And I said, why? What?
Good evening. A huge murder hunt is underway tonight after the bodies of two young girls were found in a wooded park in Brighton.
For the girls to have been abducted and taken, lured to that position, for them to be discovered in a place where someone needs to have intimate knowledge of that den, it would suggest a local man.
We were called over on the morning after the bodies were found. Even on that very first morning, when the first briefing was conducted, you could tell that this was a different form of investigation. I've been involved in previous murder inquiries, but none on the scale that this one reached. This was massive.
Detectives have already visited 2/3 of the 2,000 homes and believe that that's where they're most likely to find the killer.
There aren't many times when you see a police operation like that with that many cars and that many police officers stopping cars and talking to people. So it generated a lot of publicity beyond Brighton. It created national publicity.
Tonight, the police are warning parents not to allow their children out alone after dark.
and they're comparing notes with other police forces investigating past child murders elsewhere in the country.
There were a lot of individuals who had associations with both families and both girls who were interviewed and spoken to in those very early stages. And of course, one of those individuals was Russell Bishop.
Local father of two, Russell Bishop, first tells police he'd gone to Karen and Nicola's bodies to check for a pulse. He later changes his story to say he never touched the girls.
Bishop was constantly putting himself in and around the area, and I'm wondering if the dilemma he had was that he knew where the bodies were. It seems he was almost trying to prompt a discovery without standing out.
I felt at that stage the fact that he hadn't been in there, but he said he had, as significant.
These contradictions are enough for police to arrest Bishop, but with insufficient evidence, they're forced to release him on bail.
Bishop knocked on my door, and the first words out of his mouth was, "I didn't top the girls."
Sorry, he said that to you?
I did not top the girls, which I thought...
Isn't that a strange thing to say?
Not, how are you? He said, I've been arrested and I've been down there for ages. I said, well, I'm not talking to you anymore, I'm going to phone the police.
As the net closes in, police make a vital discovery that will come back to haunt Russell Bishop decades later.
A key item in the investigation, of course, was a Pinto sweatshirt. That came to my knowledge about 3 weeks after the girls were found to have been killed. And Eddie Redmond, the scene investigator, had phoned me and said he needed to see me urgently. And said, I've got this gov and I think there's blood on it. And I've been reading the statements and it was found on the route that Bishop took on the way home.
Bishop's route home from Wild Park takes him past Moulscombe Station, where the Pinto sweatshirt was found and initially handed in to police as a piece of seemingly insignificant lost property.
While the girls were still missing, a blue sweatshirt was found dumped some distance from Wild Park, but as it turns out, on the route between Wild Park and Bishop's home.
The sweatshirt was just found lying on a path. Nobody had any reason to connect it at that point to Bishop. It was handed in to the Lost Property Office, and it was sometime later that the exhibits manager heard that blue sweatshirt gone missing and thought, blue sweatshirt? I've seen one been handed in.
Forensic examination of the sweatshirt uncovers fibers and ivy spores from the crime scene. Analysis reveals the stains are not blood, but very specific types and shades of paint.
I'd become really suspicious as to what Russell Bishop was up to. I found that he'd got a friend who lived in Bevendine, who had a garage where he used to take his car. I just went to see him and to just find out what Russell was like. And on the sweatshirt was some mauve paint, which was a really unusual shade of paint. And went into his garage, and there was the identical paint on the wall of the garage.
Police now have a crucial link between the sweatshirt and the dead girls.
His living girlfriend, Jenny Johnson, she said when she saw it, the officer went to the door, I'm pretty certain her first words were, "Oh, you've got Russell's T-shirt." Now, you know, not even for him to say, "Is that Russell's?" She's gone, "That's his T-shirt."
The other evidence, the fibre evidence, the paint evidence, the evidence of foliage, that sealed the deal really on that sweatshirt. That was Russell's, and the police could prove that was Russell's.
I really thought, almost, I would say probably day 2, day 3, I thought Bishop was our man.
A 20-year-old unemployed labourer has been remanded in custody charged with murdering 2 Brighton schoolgirls. Hove Magistrates Court was told this morning that the man, Russell Bishop, had strenuously denied killing 9-year-old Karen Hadaway and her friend Nicola Fellows.
In November 1987, Russell Bishop stands trial at Lewes Crown Court for the murders of Karen and Nicola.
Tomorrow in court, evidence is expected to be heard from the first of the defence witnesses.
The court has already heard that Russell Bishop ran to the place where the bodies were discovered by 2 youths.
Then, midway through proceedings, the trial is dramatically turned on its head when Bishop's partner, Jenny Johnson, changes her entire story, claiming she was bullied by Sussex Police into making her original statement.
So at first she identified the sweatshirt as belonging to Russell Bishop. And then at the trial, she changed her mind and said that was not the case. And that became a huge sticking point and scuppered that link between the sweatshirt and the murders and Bishop.
At one stage, they felt absolutely certain that Russell Bishop's girlfriend was going to say, yes, that's his sweatshirt. They didn't know that when she came to court, she was going to, never seen it. Don't know what you're talking about.
So the link which police thought they had in the evidence was discounted. I don't think it was ever in doubt that the killer wore that sweatshirt, and the person that was wearing that sweatshirt was Bishop, and it dented that link of continuity between Bishop and the shirt.
Furthermore, there are timing issues. The prosecution focuses on a specific time of death as between 5:15 and 6:30. But Bishop was seen leaving Wild Park around that time, and the girls were seen alive, eating chips at around 6:45.
When the judge, based around the evidence and the way that the prosecution had been presented and focused, told the jury that if they could not be sure that the girls were dead by 6:30, they must acquit. I think they didn't get any further than that question.
Despite the complexity of this case, the jury at Lewes Crown Court takes less than 2 hours to reach a verdict.
The man who had been accused of murdering 2 schoolgirls from Brighton has been found not guilty. Russell Bishop had denied murdering Nicola Fellows and Karen Hadaway.
Russell Bishop's parents and brothers emerged from the court to say justice had been done and to cross the road for a celebratory drink.
I just could not make for the life of me why they got it wrong. And I thought, well, where do we go from here? And then the police told us they were not looking for anyone else.
I was numb, absolutely numb. It was so bad, I made as a person a special effort to go and explain to the families that we had got the right man.
Found him not guilty. And I thought, couldn't they look into his eyes and see what person he is?
To say that people were disappointed was an understatement. People were devastated because it was all of our firm beliefs that Bishop was responsible.
One of the extraordinary twists in this case is that Barrie Fellows was himself accused of killing his daughter.
To be accused of being complicit in the abuse of your daughter and then for killing your daughter is just so outrageous that only a psychopath could come up with that particular line of defence.
With Bishop, he clearly played into that whole thing of creating that fear and suspicion in the community that then followed, because obviously it couldn't be him, so it had to be somebody in that community.
The first suggestion that Barrie Fellows had done anything wrong came the Sunday after the first acquittals.
The accusation against Barrie Fellows is that he has watched a video of his own daughter being raped by his lodger. He vehemently denies it. This is fully investigated by Sussex Police, who conclude that Barrie is completely innocent of all the allegations against him.
This is from him, Bishop, looking for a scapegoat, and I'm it. and I've been it for 32 years. I never laid a finger on my little girl. The only way I laid a finger on my little girl was love.
It could not be Barrie Fellows, but the defence solicitor would not at any time, right up to the very end, he never would accept that it wasn't Barrie Fellows. Anybody could kill those two girls except Russell Bishop. There's no way he could have done it.
He was persuasive in that he was, if you like, the hero of the story, having found or being amongst the first to find the bodies, and not the perpetrator of what was an abysmal crime.
I felt absolutely dreadful because I just knew, honestly, it sounds, it's all very easy with hindsight, I just knew that man would do it again.
The community now actively campaigns to have the case reopened and organise a march for justice through the streets of Brighton. Incredibly, at the forefront of this march is Russell Bishop.
The thing is, we've still got to get this case reopened, and that's all what's been on my mind, is to get this case reopened.
I suppose some people might be surprised that you're now linking up with the parents of the two murdered schoolgirls, having been accused yourself of their murder.
People are very surprised. People keep asking me, why do I keep on and on and on? The fact is, I want to see this case reopened. My name isn't cleared until someone else has brought to justice the real person.
We walked from Wild Park to Brighton, then to the police station.
He did?
Yeah, with us, yeah, jumping on buses and that, and trying to get signatures to say that he didn't do it. He was innocent.
I refused to go on the march at the beginning, but my brother said, you've got to show face, Barrie, you've got to march with him. Got a petition up, me taking signatures off of people, because I wanted this case kept alive, and would not stop until justice was served.
I would have to say that it sickened me, and I'm sure it sickened many other people. And in hindsight, I'm pretty certain it sickened certain family members, because deep down, they realised that he was the guilty party.
Seeing the smirking Russell Bishop, seeing the parents of the kids who had been murdered and knew, as well as I knew, that Bishop had done it. It was horrific. So in the foyer of Brighton Police Station, in came Mrs. Bishop.
You arrested the wrong folks, why don't you admit it? You arrested the wrong man.
And the woman was spitting with rage. And that rage was directed straight at me as being the visible representation of senior policing in Brighton. Humiliating.
The inability to find and convict the girl's killer would sour relations between police and the community for years. But this failure was to have even more tragic consequences.
Claire was out roller skating. She'd asked her dad if she could have some money to go to the local shop, which was very close by. She became aware that there was somebody near a car, and then moments later she was grabbed and put into the boot of the car.
She's snatched, literally snatched off the street, thrown into the boot of this car, lid come down and driven off at speed. I mean, how frightening, how awful that must have been for her. And she was able to see certain little things. She saw cans of WD-40, which she describes as the sort of thing that my dad used to use to get the car going. She saw a hammer in there, and with that hammer she started bashing on the bonnet or the back of the boot. Shouted at by the guy who was driving the car, "Shut up, be quiet or I'll kill you." She was frightened to death, absolutely frightened to death. But she kept her wits about her. She took her boots off.
If the opportunity was there to run, when the boot was open, she'd might try and make a dash for it. I mean, this is a little plucky 7-year-old girl. He pulls up off the road. She was dragged literally forcibly into the back seat of the car. She was strangled, stripped, sexually assaulted, strangled to the point that I honestly believe that he thought that he'd killed her. He took her body, literally took her dead body, as far as he was concerned, naked dead body, and just threw it into the gorse bushes.
The girl was found wandering near this clearing after the alleged attack.
She walked out and into a beauty spot. And there was a couple there having a cup of tea. She approached them. She checked out that they weren't kidnappers. And they put a jumper on her and a coat round her and took her down to the golf club where the police were called.
The first sort of 24 hours of an inquiry are the most important because that's where the evidence can be really brought together. We had the team who were looking after the little girl. We then had to bring a team in and we had to work out on the information that we were getting, which was sort of being fed back to us all the time. We knew we were talking about, obviously, a paedophile type attack.
I remember very clearly going in and just seeing this very tiny little girl, naked, very, very scarred and bleeding. She was in a mess, quite frankly. I started asking about what the person looked like, and she was able to say that it was a man younger than her father. I asked if he was clean-shaven or not, and because of my training, I actually said, did he have a beard and a moustache? And she was able to say that it was just a moustache. The dike is a bleak place, and it was razed to the ground, basically. I mean, there was nothing left. They literally cleared it inch by inch.
The lads searched all the way across the dike, and right on the very last knockings, working their way through, and a PC said, stopped the search and said, I think I've got something here. And in the bole of this tree, right, virtually, you couldn't really see it, but he thought he saw some clothing. Forensic team came forward, slowly, surely, surgically, if you like, extracted this clothing from underneath the tree. It was clothing. It was all the clothing that the little girl had been wearing.
She had said that it was like getting undressed for bed. The clothes had been taken off over her head, and that's exactly how they'd been found, all tucked inside each other, which was remarkable, really, because it was like a little capsule of forensic evidence.
And virtually, as we recovered that last vital piece of evidence, the heavens opened and the rain came down. You know, it was as if somebody was waiting to say, right, okay, you've got the evidence, that's all the evidence you got. That'll do, you've got it.
A number of tyre tracks were also discovered, and police are examining a red Cortina car at Brighton Police Station.
During the course of the first briefing that we had, a guy called John Pearce, who was a uniformed chief inspector, he came along and said, I remember seeing a bit of intelligence this week that Russell Bishop was seen in a red car. He matches the description that was being given by the little girl. We had the tyre tracks that were identical to the Ford Cortina that was found. He's got to be seen, got to be interviewed. Go in there to see him, and immediately it's obvious he's got to be arrested.
Police in Sussex are still questioning a man in connection with the abduction and assault of a 7-year-old girl near Brighton.
There was an identity parade, which, when you think about it, a little girl of 7 having to walk into a situation where she might well be confronted by somebody who she knows has done something really horrible to her.
Let's move forward there. Right, there we are. Have a look. Right, there we are. Take your time, have a look a little way along.
There was a mirror, a one-way mirror. Our victim could look through the mirror at the line of people who were there. Some of them virtual lookalikes. Bishop went to the toilet, went down to the sink or into the toilet and got wet hair and wet his hair right down and tried to change his whole appearance completely. And she came in behind the mirror, the window, and looked along this line.
And I'm going to ask you in a moment to look through the window at the line of men who are sitting there. I shall then ask you whether the person whom you saw on that day is here.
I think it's number 9.
You think it's number 9? Thank you.
She pointed straight at Bishop. It was fabulous stuff. We knew right from the word go that there was no great defence that was available to him. So he went down the most obvious one, is that we, the Sussex Police, fitted him up. And it was a complete and absolute fabrication and a set-up and a fit-up. Jury were having none of it. They were having none of it.
Here, a man who was acquitted of murdering 2 girls in Brighton 3 years ago has been jailed for trying to murder a girl of 7. The judge at Lewes Crown Court said he was imposing a life sentence on 24-year-old Russell Bishop to protect other children from similar attacks.
Tonight, as Bishop was driven away to start his life sentence, police released a message of thanks from the little girl, who they say is recovering well from her ordeal. "All my scratches have gone," she says. "I'm having a lovely Christmas."
She's very well. I mean, she really is very well, and she's been reading the Argus with interest over the trial, and undoubtedly she'll be pleased that it's all over.
Michelle Hadaway gave her reaction to the sentence.
It's no less than what he deserved.
3 years ago this week, Bishop had left Lewes Crown Court a free man. Tonight he was taken away to begin a life sentence.
All I could say was that I was satisfied, and we were very satisfied. We still had to respect the fact that the Fellows and the Hadaways didn't have closure, and so we couldn't be jubilant, really.
It's hard, to think that when I see other little children around, and I think that should have been my daughter walking with me, her mum.
I've got a picture up on my wall. I'll say good morning to her every morning. Love you, darling.
In 2004, Russell Bishop becomes eligible for parole, a horrific prospect for the grieving families. For them, there remains nowhere to go, until a year later, there's a major change in the law.
For the first time in British legal history, the new law of double jeopardy comes.
The repeal of double jeopardy means that someone who had previously been acquitted of an offence can now be retried for the same crime. And in 2013, Detective Superintendent Jeff Riley opens a new investigation into the Babes in the Wood murders.
The key thing about a double jeopardy prosecution is you have to have evidence that's new, compelling and reliable, and that reliability comes with a capital R. But you get one chance with double jeopardy.
The key difference this time is something which was barely on the scientific radar in 1986, DNA. Ultimately, this would be the deciding factor in finally proving who killed the Babes in the Wood.
There was a whole lot of planning that went into getting Bishop out of his prison environment into a police station environment. The big day came when Bishop was told, gather your stuff, you're being moved. Because he's a Category A prisoner, he wouldn't have been told where he was going, he wouldn't have been told why he was going, but he would have been told, you're going.
I have a warrant for your arrest. The grounds for arresting you are that there is fresh evidence linking you to the murders of both Nicola Fellows and Karen Hadaway.
I think at that moment he would have realised this hasn't gone away. We've not forgotten about it.
Seriously. Just get finished, please, because I need to get back to the prison.
So what is this new and compelling evidence that prompts Bishop's rearrest? What do police now have to warrant a double jeopardy investigation?
Russell Bishop, significantly in 2016, when the evidence was put to him, he said, "I did not touch the girls." It was one of the few comments that he actually made. But of course, he had to explain his DNA away.
We knew that there were fibres that had been found that matched the girls on a sweatshirt. So it was an important item right from the start. And so we thought, well, if we re-examine it, maybe we'll be able to establish who'd worn it. It could be deemed that fibres evidence isn't new because it was available at the first trial. And in order to get over that new, you needed something that was compelling.
Roy Green took the view that actually one area that had never been examined before was the cuff. So he actually unpicked the cuff, unpeeled it, and then we were looking for where a DNA from that location, so we took some swabs from that area. And as a result of those swabs, we then got a 1 in a billion link between Russell Bishop and that sweatshirt.
Pinto's got fuck all to do with it. Yes, but... So, end of subject. I've got nothing more to say.
During interview, Bishop denied that the sweatshirt was his. He's always denied that the sweatshirt is his, and that's continued to this day.
But just when police think they have what they need, they receive a call from the scientists that threatens to undermine the entire case.
Just in isolation, looking at that result from the cuff of the sweatshirt, I couldn't rule out the possibility that Bishop's DNA could have transferred onto the cuff of the sweatshirt at some stage while the item was being handled in a laboratory.
And so we had to tell the Sussex Police that actually we can't use this.
Ross said, "Look, do you know what? Because of the prospect of contamination, I can't be 100% sure that this forensic find hasn't come as a result of contamination." In effect, we'd lost our key exhibit.
The only evidence on that Pinto from them victims are the fibres. The Pinto and the children's clothing was examined on the same table at the same time.
It was a really dark day for the investigation. But, you know, we brushed ourselves down. We met again with the scientists very quickly afterwards and said, OK, what can we learn from that? If we can't show reliability from a new piece of evidence, what we should look to do is go back to the original evidence.
The forensic pathologist would have taken tapings from the girls' bodies. That means putting effectively sellotape on their skin, lifting the sellotape and then sealing it on acetate, so the evidence is locked in.
We examined that for any possible skin flakes, cut those out of the tape, and then profiled them, and we got profile.
We had Russell Bishop's DNA on that taping. I mean, that was a massive moment for the inquiry. You know, we just didn't expect to find that.
And it's incredible for me to think that, you know, after 32 years, evidence of DNA of somebody touching somebody else was found on a taping on Karen Hadaway's arm.
We want to know, is there any reason why you would have touched her that night?
As I say, I've got no comment to make.
Okay, because if you didn't touch her...
I've got nothing to say. I'm not responsible for this. I have nothing to do with it. I'm innocent. I've been tried now. I've got no comment to make whatsoever. That's some fucking stuff genied up 30 years later.
"30 years on, police are finally ready to bring Russell Bishop back to court at the Old Bailey. Bishop admits to the abduction of the 7-year-old girl at Devil's Dyke.
Under cross-examination, Bishop admitted that for the first time that he committed this crime against this 7-year-old victim as she was in 1990. But significantly, he didn't accept there was a sexual element to it. I mean, the terms I think he used was he did it to belittle and shame her. And he somehow thought that was a defence.
And the jury was to hear even more damning evidence from letters Bishop had written to a young girl from behind bars.
She was 13 at the time. It was quite clear from the letters that Bishop knew her from when she was 11.
You know, and he was saying to her, I'm a man, not a boy, you know, can you take that type of thing? And it was quite clear he was grooming her. He first of all denied that he knew the girl, but of course we knew that he babysat her when she was 11. So under cross-examination, his whole story around the letters just started to fall apart, and actually the jury could see him for what he is, you know, a predatory paedophile grooming a 13-year-old girl.
Perhaps predictably, Bishop now resorts to a familiar and desperate allegation. Bishop's defense was still relying on this accusation against Barrie Fellows.
It's horrendous, and I watched Barrie Fellows give evidence, and it was just the most distressing thing that I've seen in a courtroom in many years of policing.
I hate the man for what he's done to me and put members of my family through.
Anybody who watched Barry's evidence kind of failed to be moved by it. I know I was. You know, this man was broken by this allegation, and you could just see it. But you know what? He was strong. He answered the questions. He didn't run away. You know, Russell Bishop, the moment the allegation was put to him that he was a sex offender, he left the witness box and never returned. And that, I think, shows a difference between the character between the two. Barry stood there and took it and answered questions. Russell Bishop ran away.
In an ironic parallel with the original trial, the jury takes less than 3 hours to find Russell Bishop guilty of the Babes in the Wood murders.
The jury went out at 12:20, and by 3:05, we were being told the jury's back in court, we have a verdict.
After decades of deceit, Russell Bishop will now have a lifetime behind bars to reflect on the murders he committed. Today he was given 2 life sentences, one for each of the little girls' lives he brutally ended.
As Detective Superintendent Jeff Riley said at the end of the trial, I am delighted with the sentence of 36 years, which reflects the magnitude of these crimes. Bishop, I hope, will spend the remainder of his life behind bars, never to darken the streets of Brighton again.
It's made me believe in justice.
I wanted a little girl and that. You know, just to be taken away from me. You know, at 9 years old.
Some people won't believe the truth until it hits them right there, right in the face. This is the truth, and the truth is he murdered 2 little girls. He tried to murder another little girl. He is now wallowing in prison where he should be.
In summing up, Justice Sweeney told Bishop, you were convicted on now overwhelming evidence of the murders of Nicola Fellows and Karen Hadaway. The terror that each girl must have suffered in their final moments is unimaginable. Referring to the families, Justice Sweeney said, the victim personal statements speak with great dignity and force of the extent of the loss suffered by each of their families and of the suffering that they have endured over so many years. Must have been a moment of great vindication for you when he was found guilty.
Oh, God,
Second.
yeah. I said, now we got him, he's gonna do the time, and now my daughter don't have to go flying around in the air for justice. She can go back and sleep in her angel bed.